I gotta say, with Mario Galaxy, I had quite the experience as I found myself wrestling the entire time I played the game. There was an assortment of things that I really enjoyed about the game, but there was also in that assortment a handful of things that continued to kind of rear its ugly head that kind of rained on the parade a little bit as I played the game. I also want to just say that I played the 3D All-Stars version of this, so I decided to use the Joy-Cons to kind of mimic that Wii Remote experience and kind of get the real deal. The intro was phenomenal. Nintendo really flexing those 2007 graphics by showcasing Bowser launching an all-out attack on the Mushroom Kingdom. It was so cool to see fire raining down from the skies and watching the Toads scatter in the streets below looking for safety. I really like the cinematic experience that they did with the intro. A lot of the time you just end up reading dialogue, you just kind of reading, and it's super boring. But it was cool to kind of see an actual cutscene, because a lot of the Mario games up until this point didn't really have cutscenes. I love the outer space theme and moving in between all the small planets as we're exploring the galaxies. It just made the scale of the game feel so much more grandiose than that of its predecessors. And don't get me wrong, Mario kind of traversing the Mushroom Kingdom to, fight Bowser's baddies and do whatever he needs to do to save the day is cool. Even Delfino Plaza, you're going on like a vacation island and you're moving around. But this was different. You're in outer space. You're out there and you're like soaring or flying, through the stars. And it just kind of felt like an out of this world or larger than life experience, which is, just really cool. It really set the tone for the game. The set pieces that Nintendo weave in Super Mario Galaxy yet again impress and exceed my imagination. Not so much because of the originality, but because of how well they creatively sculpt the levels in every game they make. For example, Dry Desert is a place you see in multiple Mario games, but when you sit them next to each other, they never feel like a copy and paste, and I think that's one of Nintendo's biggest strengths. I think the improved graphics also really help with all this creativity, because as technology advances, Nintendo has more things that they can do, more color they can bring to the screen, more detail, more special effects and things that they can do, and it just gives the game so much more life. So when it comes to galaxies, the Ghost Galaxy is my favorite, which for those of you who don't know, it's the one that's like kind of themed after Luigi's Mansion. It was cool to see them bring back old school mechanics like, looking away from the ghost and then they try to, attack you from behind while you're not looking, but also introduce the cool mechanics of Mario Galaxy like the slingshot stuff and spinning and moving through the stars and gravity and all of that. Also being mixed into it was really cool. And that's again going back to that creativity that I've been speaking so highly about. The Boo transformation was also really cool, being able to kind of float in the air, go into the paintings and phase through walls. I've always kind of wanted to see what it was like to be a Boo in the game, and I feel like they did a great job with this. They introduced it, but it didn't overstay its welcome, and honestly, it just made the galaxy that much more Boolicious. Getting into the boss fights, I really enjoyed their designs and the fight itself. The challenge wasn't really there, but it's a Mario game. You're not really getting a Dark Souls experience from this. You're really just there for the experience and to smell the roses, And that's not to say that Mario games can't be challenging, because, oh my goodness, yes, they can be, but this was a more casual one. And I like that they stayed away from jumping on bosses' heads. You do that a little bit, but it's not like that with every single boss. There's a good amount of creativity. And I will say that they even borrowed a little bit of the tennis action from like Zelda, when like you're fighting like Ganondorf and you're kind of doing the tennis racket stuff, bouncing the projectile back and forth. So it was cool to see them borrow elements from other games and use them here and kind of keep things fresh. While we're on the topic of bosses, I'll say Bouldergeist, which is the Ghost Galaxy boss, which if you don't know Ghost Galaxy, that's the area where it's themed after Luigi's Mansion, which is like a haunted house if you don't even know what Luigi's Mansion is. I really liked the fight because, one, I felt like a space cowboy as I was like lassoing the boos over my head and slamming them into the side of the boss, which again is different from your traditional jump on the head tactics. I really enjoyed that. That's all you really needed to do to get through the fight, but it was still cool and you could have multiple boos, and I thought that was awesome. I also just want to give a quick nod to Nintendo too, because this boss archetype, meaning like the way the boss is shaped, is not new to this specific level. It was actually used in Ocarina of Time in the Shadow Temple, where you fight the boss Bongo Bongo, where Bongo Bongo is like a floating like head torso thing, and it has like feet or hands that it hits the battlefield with. And they kind of took that and they evolved it, shaped it, going back to what I said earlier about the sculpting, and they kind of took that boss archetype and made into its own special thing within Mario Galaxy, excuse me. And he also did it with Wind Waker. Wind Waker also had a boss that was similar to that, where it was like a temple head, and it had like two external pieces of the body. that it would attack with or use for whatever. And I just thought it was cool that they took that stuff and they molded it into something and brought it to this game. So heads up, hats off to Nintendo for that. Lastly, for like the positive things I have to say about the game, I really like I don't know if I would call it replay value or kind of like special events with like the comet coming down. I like that there were these like certain galaxies had comets that would appear that would dynamically change the way you play that level, where you might be doing like a timed challenge where you have to complete the level within like 2 minutes. Maybe you're racing like a Shadow Mario to get to the end, or maybe you just have to beat the boss with like 1 HP only, and if you get hit, that's it, you have to restart. I really like that. It was cool. It kind of encouraged you to go back and check other areas if the comet wasn't there, and it just kind of added like, I don't know, like almost like a Kmart blue light special where they're like, hey, come check this out or whatever. You just kind of always keep your ear open for it or kind of watching for it, and I thought that was a cool thing. So with the cons, I want to be clear that these are more so pain points and they're not deal breakers for the game. I still had an awesome experience, but these were things that happened throughout the game that kind of put a little small damper on the experience, where it was like, okay, I got to do this again. So like for starters, having to keep putting my star back in the middle of the screen. If I moved my arms around, if I grabbed a drink of water, took a quick bite of a snack, if I took my hands from above the desk and put them below the desk, you name it, any kind of movement that deviates from the way it was calibrated, now you have to go back to the calibration process again. And that could be like every 7 to 10 minutes. If you move a lot, if I'm streaming, so like I stream throughout this experience, so I might be typing in a window and whatnot, and maybe it's specific to a streamer issue with that extra stuff, but having to recalibrate like every 7 minutes or so, or 10 minutes was, I don't know, it wasn't frustrating, but it was just like, oh man, here we go again type of energy, and it kind of put a small damper on it. I wouldn't say it ruined a lot, but it definitely was noticeable. It's something that I kind of talked about and complained about a lot, or maybe not a lot, but enough throughout the game to where I needed to bring it up in the video. Another thing was that the directional changes in combination with using like the Joy-Cons were also kind of rough. Now maybe if you use Joy-Cons all the time, it's nothing, but if you're primarily a controller holder, which I would imagine most people are, then it gets tricky when you navigate into these more complex levels and you're jumping off a platform onto like a moving target and things are turning upside down and going left and right and this way and that way. And it gets a little confusing, and you also makes you super hesitant to where like you're ripping and running, you're having fun, and now it's like, whoa, I gotta really slow down. And it kind of just, I can't explain it, but it just feels like the game comes to a crawl when you have to do stuff like that, where you have to really, really stop and just like do algebra to land on a platform, and you have to do that like 6 or 7 times in a row, or maybe just a couple, and it just kind of slowed down the experience for me. I think the platforming is probably the key component to why I didn't like the camera direction changes, because if you do a camera direction change like on the planet, like if you're on a planet and you're running around like on a sphere, and you go on the backside, you're upside down or whatever, sure, no big deal. But once you have to jump and you miss your jump and you die for it, that's when it gets frustrating. And then I think that's what it was. And that was like a reoccurring thing throughout the game, where the camera changes and you have to jump from one planet to another, and it was just weird. It was like the directional changes were just kind of interfering with me a little bit. Sometimes it felt like I'd be trying to run at an angle or something, and like it just wasn't responding the right way, and I'd end up turning and running in another direction or something quirky like that. And I don't know, it wasn't non-stop, but it was enough for me to notice and kind of maybe complain or talk about it throughout the playthrough to the stream and whatnot. So I think ultimately I had a great time with the game and it was fun. I just think that platforming plus like Wii remote or motion controls, whatever you want to call it, I don't think that's the best combination, especially when things get complex. If you keep it simple, those parts of the game weren't too bad. But once you start getting it like complex with it, that's when it kind of starts to become a pain in the butt, and it really slows down the flow of the game. And it goes from this cheery jumping around, leaping through space, to this like I make one false move and I'm going down kind of energy, and that's not so much as fun. I mean, maybe it is for some people, but for me, it wasn't. But these are pain points. It didn't ruin the game for me. That being said, I'd love to hear your comments on this, what you thought about the game, your favorite memories, and all that good stuff. Like the video if you made it this far, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure to sub. Y'all stay safe out there, and peace out until next time.